Good evening. I'll call this meeting of the Housing Authority of the City of Salem for Monday, June 27th, 2022 to order. If the recorder will please call the roll.
Vice Chair Stapleton.
I'm here.
Commissioner Anderson.
I am too.
Commissioner Phillips.
Here.
Commissioner Leung. Absent. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Nordyke.
Here.
Commissioner Varney.
Here.
Chair Hoy.
Here.
Thank you.
And if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Vice Chair Stapleton, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
We do not.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on the consent calendar?
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you. All right, the consent calendar consists of item 3.1A, the May 23rd, 2022 draft Salem Housing Authority minutes. Item 3.2A, a grant agreement between the Salem Housing Authority and the City of Salem. And that concludes our consent calendar.
Thank you. Any discussion? The recorder will please call the roll.
Commissioner Leung is absent. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Nordyke.
Aye.
Commissioner Varney.
Aye.
Vice Chair Stapleton.
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Phillips.
Aye.
Chair Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. I see that we have no public hearings. We have no special orders of business, but we do have information reports. And I see we have our housing administrator, Ms. Nicole Utes, with us. Ms. Utes, do you have any comments before we open it up for questions?
Good evening, I'm Nicole Utes. I'm the Housing Administrator for Salem Housing Authority. And tonight I just wanted to point out that Salem Housing Authority has attracted the attention nationally to participate in webinars and strategies and being able to develop and bring more affordable housing into smaller entities. So we were chosen as one of 2 housing authorities recently to participate in a nationwide webinar. That's drawn a lot of attention throughout the nation now to also seek out additional information on how we're making this happen in our area. And I just wanted to congratulate all the commissioners and all of the Salem Housing Authority staff for all their hard work to make this happen, because it's even gaining a national attention on how well it's being completed. The other thing I also wanted to draw attention to is we do have 2 new staff. That is, we are upwards of probably 15 new staff by now here at Salem Housing Authority. We are going through a lot of transition and training. We're excited. We have lots of great individuals who've joined our team, and they come with a lot of energy and willingness to get out there and participate. But we are asking for patience and understanding, as our timeline to get back to individuals has taken a little bit longer than we typically do within 24 hours. Also, our office is open. We have beautiful kiosks. Everything's functional fully. People can self-serve in themselves and come in and do online applications. It's a really great system at our front desk now.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say thank you for your leadership. You've done an amazing job with leading the organization, and it's not an accident that we're getting that national attention. And without you, we certainly wouldn't be there. So thank you for your leadership and all of your amazing work with recruiting new talent to our agency. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Council President Hoy. My first thing I was going to say was the exact same thing to you, Ms. Utes. You congratulated everybody else, but you're much too modest to congratulate yourself. So I think the council wants to congratulate you, or the Housing Authority wants to congratulate you, because you're the fulcrum of all these projects, and it's been terrific working with you, and your ideas and energy are fantastic. And we look forward to many, many more years of onward and upward for the Salem Housing Authority. So you can pat yourself on the back now. I do have a question about the voucher lease-ups, and I may have asked this before. Mainstream NED, 43%. The others are all 85, 90, where you would expect lease-ups to be. What's the story with Mainstream NED?
Certainly. So the mainstream NED is non-elderly and disabled. we actually were allocated this extra funding source for vouchers, which we appreciate greatly. It came with one caveat that we had to go through our entire waiting list, to go through every single applicant on the waiting list to verify whether we could find anybody on that waiting list first before we could go out to the general population to try to utilize these vouchers. That took an immense amount of time to get through about 3,000 applicants on our waiting list. So that is not our standard to have a 48%. I can tell you that they will be fully utilized as quick as we can get them leased up, as quick as they can find apartments available as well. And a key to that success has been, as you see that number quickly starting to rise, has been our landlord navigator. She has moved mountains to really connect individuals, and it's gained the attention of the local HUD office here, because our lease up rate jumped to about 71% success as soon as we added those outreach navigator and landlord navigator positions. And I attest that to the staff, that is really going hand in hand. So when a case manager gets a file and they're ready to lease up, that goes to landlord navigation, outreach navigation, and they really are the ones connecting the dots and helping that person navigate through this entire very government process to get them into a house.
Excellent. Are there other questions? Well, keep up the amazing work, Ms. Yates, and please pass along our thanks to the entire staff for the great work that they're doing. We know that it's been a difficult time during COVID, and with all of the transitions with the state gobbling up so many of our employees, we know that that's put an extra burden on them, and we really appreciate their hard work, because it's really the staff who make this organization a success, and we really appreciate them. So thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we are adjourned.
Well, good evening. I'm going to call the City of Salem Urban Renewal Agency to order. Amy, if you could call the roll.
Board Member Stapleton.
Here.
Board Member Anderson.
Present.
Board Member Phillips.
Here.
Board Member Leung, absent. Board Member Gonzalez.
Here.
Board Member Hoy.
Here.
Board Member Nordyke.
Here.
Board Member Varney.
Here.
Chair Bennett.
Here. Okay. Any additions or deletions, Councilor?
No.
Okay. I have no public comment. The consent calendar then.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Second by Anderson.
We have item 3.1A, the June 13th, 2022 draft urban renewal agency minutes. Item 3.2A, the fiscal year 2023 urban renewal agency of the City of Salem budget. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Okay. Amy, if you could please call the roll.
Board Member Varney.
Aye.
Board Member Stapleton.
Aye.
Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Board Member Phillips.
Aye.
Board Member Leung, absent. Board Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Board Member Hoy.
Aye.
Board Member Nordyke.
Aye.
Chair Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. No action items, no public hearings, no special orders of business. So we'll go to information reports. Ms. Rutherford, did you want to?
The only thing that I have to comment on is for folks that haven't been through downtown in a while. Next time you go downtown and you are on Liberty Street, you will see a big pile of rubble where Nordstrom was and the Sky Bridge is down. And very soon you will be seeing apartment buildings going up downtown. That's my only update from Urban Renewal.
I'll tell you, on a hot evening, I think it was Saturday and Sunday evening downtown, it was just packed. Despite the Sky Bridge coming down and all the other things going on, it was really very busy. So the work seems to be going well down there. Very good. Yes, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to comment that I'm old enough to remember standing there when they were putting that thing up, and having been there during that time when I was, I think, a freshman or a sophomore at Willamette. And so it's interesting to see that come full circle.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Anyone else want to take a stroll down memory lane? I can remember when there was other buildings there before they started that thing.
Table
Quite a-
that's right.
It's been a great change downtown. It's neat to see after 50 years, it's doing a new cycle. Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you. Yes, I was also wondering if you could give a little information to folks about the streetscaping that's happening this summer downtown as well, because I know that is also causing some congestion. There's lots and lots of disruption to sidewalks and to parking. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Certainly. So it was a few years ago that council adopted, or the Urban Renewal Agency Board technically adopted the downtown streetscape plan. And this is something that we started implementing just at the beginning of COVID. So it's been a slow rollout because of the pandemic. The current installation is on, you'll see it forming around on Commercial Street and around Court Street, State Street, kind of that section. And then this will be progressing throughout downtown. Sometimes we'll be lining it up where new construction is underway. So for example, when the Nordstrom building is rebuilt, they will be implementing the streetscape. Where the hotel's going up, we're implementing they're implementing, and then we're building next to it. So we have completed sections.
Could you characterize it, Kristen, what it brings to the streetscape?
Well, so a lot of what it's bringing to the streetscape won't be visible because it's underground infrastructure to provide irrigation so that we can eventually add more greenery, and also electricity. So that once we have this implemented, we too will be able to have beautiful twinkle lights in our downtown that we don't have the infrastructure for now. And then what it's also going to do is bring consistency to our sidewalks throughout downtown so that we have consistent sections in the look and feel from block to block to block in how our streetscapes are organized and how they feel, and where we have furniture zones and pedestrian zones.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much. Is there any further business for the Urban Renewal Agency? Okay, we'll be adjourned. And I'll call this meeting of the Salem City Council for June 27th to order. If recorder, please call the roll.
Councilor Stapleton,
Here.
Councilor Anderson,
Here.
Councilor Phillips,
Here.
Councilor Leung, absent, Councilor Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilor Hoy,
Here.
Councilor Nordyke.
Here.
Councilor Barney,
Here.
Mayor Bennett.
Here. Okay. Additions and deletions, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of revisions to the agenda.
Second.
Second by Stapleton.
So item 5.A has been deleted from the agenda. And also, I would like to reorder the agenda, moving item 5D to 1.4B. We'll pull a presentation from special orders of business up to presentations.
Very good. Any discussion? Okay, Amy, if you'd please call the roll.
Councilor Anderson,
Aye.
Councilor Phillips,
Aye.
Councilor Leung, absent, Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy,
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Barney,
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton,
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Then we'll go on to Councilor and City Manager comments. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to let everybody know about 3 events that I attended, a couple of them on the mayor's behalf recently within the past 10 days or so. Last weekend, I attended the 17th Annual Sikh Day Parade and spoke to folks there. It was an amazing event. If you've never been to that, I definitely recommend you put that on your calendar. People come from all over the Northwest and other states to be here. And it's really a wonderful event with amazing food and really a really rich time. I definitely encourage you to attend that. And then also on the 19th, I attended the NAACP Juneteenth celebration and delivered the Mayor's Proclamation. And that was a wonderful event as well, and definitely encourage folks to attend. And then yesterday, I attended the Micronesian Islander Community graduation celebration. They sort of had a 3-year catch-up celebration from the pandemic, celebrating high school and college graduations for the past 3 years from folks in the Salem area and also some folks from the Seattle area. It was a really wonderful event over at the Pringle Community Hall, again, with amazing food and amazing conversation and discussion about the richness of the culture. And I learned a lot of things. I was really glad to be able to attend that. So just wanted to mention that to folks.
Thank you very much, Councilor. Councilor Nordyke, did you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to share a medical situation that I had recently, and that's not something I normally share, but I really had an epiphany from it that I do want to share with the group. You may have noticed I'm wearing glasses, which I almost never wear, and that's because I'm normally a contact lens wearer. But I developed a corneal ulcer in my right eye, and I woke up 2 Sundays ago with a lot of symptoms that scared me. And unlike a lot of people, I knew that my doctor's office had some kind of messaging service. So I called them, and the doctor called me back, and I was able to be seen that day on a Sunday afternoon. But the thing is, I didn't have to worry about a language barrier or a cultural barrier impeding my ability to describe my symptoms, advocate for myself, or understand my doctor's instructions. I didn't have to worry about an interpreter being available on a Sunday afternoon, nor did I have to worry about how I would get there. My doctor's office is not walking distance from my house. There is no bus service from my home. And yet, because I can afford my own car, I had no difficulty being seen at a moment's notice. Nor did I have any caregiving obligations, so I was able to go and take care of my needs without worrying about taking care of other needs. Once I got to the doctor's office, he promptly prescribed antibiotic eye drops to take care of the infection. And I didn't have to worry about how much the doctor's visit was going to cost me or how much the antibiotic drops would cost me because I have great insurance. Then my doctor told me I needed to go to the nearest pharmacy ASAP to get started on this treatment. And the only pharmacy that I knew that was open on a Sunday afternoon was several miles away. Now, if I had to rely on bus service, it might have taken me half the day just to get to the doctor's office, go to the appointment, and then go to the pharmacy, assuming it was still open, assuming that they had my medication ready for pickup. And then, of course, I would have to find a way home. But because I own my own car, that was not a problem. Then the workday began on Monday. And I have a job that's flexible enough that if I have to drop everything I need to in order to go to an urgent medical appointment, I can. And sure enough, my doctor had told me he would need to see me probably 6 times over the course of 2 weeks to make sure that I was making progress. He adjusted my medication throughout this process, which of course meant more trips to the pharmacy. Now, how would I have done any of this if I was homeless? How would I have done this if I had severe physical disabilities or intellectual disabilities? What if I was a senior citizen who lived at home and didn't have a caregiver checking on her all the time? What if I was a child and I didn't have regular access to a caregiver to take care of me? What if I lived in a tent? Who would have watched my stuff at camp while I went to 6 different doctor's appointments over the week? And if I was a caregiver, who would have handled my responsibilities every time I spent half the day going to a doctor's office and going to a pharmacy that was not located on the doctor's office's premises? What if I had a boss who was unsympathetic to this and made sure that I would not receive any paid leave while I took care of my medical emergency? My eye doctor told me that It was just bad luck getting this ulcer. I may have bad luck, but I have a safety net, and that makes all the difference in the world these days. And if you are homeless or a low-income individual, or if you struggle with any of those challenges that I previously mentioned, a little bit of bad luck can go a long way. I could have faced irreparable damage to my eye. So right now across America, tens of thousands of people with medical conditions, mental health conditions, and or disabilities are on our streets. This includes seniors, children, veterans, teenagers, survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking, and many others. Unfortunately, homelessness is getting worse across our nation. And you can take a look at news reports from NPR. Homelessness is soaring. It's not just a Salem problem or an Oregon problem or even a West Coast problem. This is happening everywhere. But speaking of Oregon, I was at the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency meeting recently, and they reported severe rent burden across the state of Oregon. About 27% of households now have 50% rent burdened, meaning that they spend about 50% of their monthly income just to stay indoors. And 50% of Black households in our state face that same severe rent burden of about 50%, demonstrating yet again the disproportional impact this is having on our communities of color. The Community Action Agency also told me that half of Oregon renters spend 30% or more of their monthly income on rent. In addition, manufactured home prices soared during the pandemic. In January 2020, they used to be under $90,000. Now they're over $120,000. You may also have seen in our testimony from Linnell Wilcox, she reported that according to our US Census, almost 37% of the population in Oregon say they are behind in their rent or their mortgage, and they are likely to lose their home to eviction or foreclosure within the next 2 months. And nearly 40% of all Oregonians aged 65 and older reported that they were at least somewhat likely to face eviction or foreclosure. So homelessness is going to get worse here in Oregon and around the nation. And I want to say this to remind folks of the compelling need at every level of government to do our part. The city has millions to play with, the state has billions to play with, and the federal government has trillions. And I think all of us should be asking every elected official at every level, how are they prioritizing their spending? So thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Phillips.
Sorry, lost it there. Okay. Thank you, Mayor Bennett and Councilor Nordyke. I'm sorry for what you're going through. I'm pretty aware of corneal ulcers. They are quite painful. So I wish you a speedy recovery. That being said, updates that I have, I'm looking forward to the final ribbon cutting happening at the Salem Hospital campus this Wednesday, June 29th at 10 a.m., where they will finally be opening the new tower next to Building A. We'll have 150 new state-of-the-art beds capable physically of providing ICU level care in the expanded Building A. And it's quite an incredible process to see that tower go from just a parking lot to a 7-story building in the last 2 years. It was really cool to tour it with Council President Hoy and Mayor Bennett last month with the elected leaders in the area. And see what the patients will get to, experience starting July 14th of this month. It's been a hectic time on campus, but I'm really happy to see it come to fruition. The Salem Hospital is growing in a way to continue to meet the care needs of this community and beyond. And then just, final reminder, as an emergency room doctor, still caring for patients with COVID-19 every single shift. I would just remind everyone that to avail themselves of the safe and effective, highly effective COVID-19 vaccines. Right now, every single person age 6 months and up can get fully vaccinated. And if you're 5 years and older, you can get boosted. So if you haven't done that yet, do it now. Don't try to time the market. There's benefit to getting as many of the booster shots as you are offered and recommended. They make a difference, and it makes it easier for those of us on the front lines of healthcare. And it's always been, super busy in the last few years. So anything you can do to make our jobs a little easier, we greatly appreciate. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gonzalez.
Gracias, Mayor. Buenas tardes. My name is Jose Gonzalez, and I introduce myself in multiple languages to highlight our city's longtime diversity. And I wanted to congratulate the Salem Multicultural Institute. They hosted I think it's the 25th annual World Beat Festival, actually 24th. And it was started by Mona Hayes and Kathleen Fish in '98. And they shared there were some really difficult some incidents, and they noticed a tension happening, and that's why they created the World Beat Festival. And now it's about 20. I don't know what their attendance was this time, but it was averaging about 25,000 people. And I was downtown, and it was busy. It was a great event, a little hot, but I know it went well for them. So I want to congratulate them, and it was just a great event, bringing people of multiple cultures together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, Ms. Rutherford.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 items this evening. The first is, as we get close to Independence Day, I want to remind our residents to keep it legal and keep it safe out there, and remind everyone that the fireworks that launch into the air, that those are illegal in Oregon, and we encourage everybody to use the legal consumer fireworks. And for those that don't launch them into the air and get frustrated, their neighbors that do, we enforce this the best that we can, given the resources we have and the size of the community. But immediate public safety and emergency calls will take priority over calls about illegal fireworks. So I think we can all help each other out, especially as temperatures are rising and fire risk grows, to keep them on the ground and use the legal fireworks. Then the second item is one that Councilor Nordyke asked me to bring up, and this is going back to the temperatures that we're seeing. I have Nicole here this evening, and we also have Chief Niblock here this evening to talk about what we're doing through outreach through Salem Housing Authority and with our nonprofit communities and with our own tenants to address the climbing heat and to also talk about cooling centers. So I'll have Nicole first, and then Chief Niblock.
Good evening, I'm Nicole Yates. I'm the Housing Administrator for Salem Housing Authority. And I can tell you that we did focus a lot of energy this last week by our outreach navigation teams that were out in the encampments. And they actually handed out water that was still in source and available from the city of Salem. They provided several bottles to each location and educated the individuals of the upcoming heat wave and the climbing temperatures and different ways and efforts to ensure that they can stay cool, including seeking shelter or shaded areas throughout the day. We also worked to ensure that they had access to their SNAP benefits to ensure they could get Gatorades and other resources to try to continue to cool themselves, and gave them different tips and methods to keeping cool. On top of that, our Salem Housing Authority properties all do comply with our new air conditioning rules that went into effect. We also are concentrating effort to make sure that all AC units in our senior facilities are working at full capacity. I can tell you that mechanics did respond to 2 call outs over the weekend to ensure that ACs were working order at all times. And we're going through the housing inspection process to make sure that all of our functioning units are working at and maintained for this summer.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. Mike Niblock, Fire Chief. Just a quick update. We're looking at the period of time from 0800 Friday morning till 0800 Sunday morning, so a 72-hour period. We had a total of 330 calls for service during that period, which is a little above average for us, probably caused by some of the heat events. There were only 12 related heat calls for 911. 5 of those were unsheltered individuals. They were transported to the hospital and later discharged. So no serious heat issues there. Probably heat exhaustion or dehydration type things. But a total of 12 people, 9 were transported. All of them were discharged. 3 of them were refused transport. And like the city manager said, we encourage people to follow the rules and the laws regarding fireworks with the 4th of July coming up. We had a very wet spring, but it's really drying out now. And of course, the wet spring makes all the weeds grow really well. And so now they're drying out. So really, really want you to focus on safety and respect for your neighbors, and just don't light off the ones that go in the air. They're illegal, and we'll do what we can to enforce, but typically this is a very busy day for us. Days around the 4th of July and after the 4th of July for both police and fire are really taxed on emergency calls, and it's difficult to get out and enforce those noise complaint type issues. So if people just be respectful of each other and follow the rules, that would be much appreciated. You can still light off the Safe and Sane fireworks. You can buy those at any stand in Salem. Those are all the legal fireworks that we would encourage you to use. And then just another thing that people can do is just stay hydrated before we have these hot spells. Drink a lot of water. Don't stay away from sugary drinks and caffeinated drinks. Just drink water. That's the best thing for you, and pre-hydrate yourself. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions? Yes, Councilor Phillips.
Yeah, I appreciate all the staff being on here, and Councilor Stapleton and others for asking these questions ahead of time. Or was it Councilor Nordyke? I'm so sorry, I forgot. Anyway, this is the 1-year anniversary of the heat dome that we experienced last year, which I'm so grateful that we're 20, 23 degrees cooler than we were with our all-time devastating records that we sent a year ago. But I guess my question in this process is, this last couple of days was more of what we're used to, just in the high 90s. Moving forward, if we get into those, triple digits, where people's lives truly are at risk, where can community members turn to for a centralized source to get up-to-date information? Like, should they look at, City of Salem's website? Should they look at Facebook? Where can community members go?
So great question. We have a lot of community partners that participate in opening cooling centers. When the weather is 100 plus degrees. So they don't open them till it's 100 degrees. So they didn't open them last weekend. It was 99 for just a few hours there. And so when it gets 100 degrees, they start opening these centers, and that's Arches and a lot of the churches in the area. City of Salem website, the Arches website, we'll always update that, the Facebook pages with all the information of the operation of hours for these centers. We have opened our library during its business hours for a cooling center, Center 50 plus, churches, stores. The other thing we ask people to do is, in those periods of time, please check on your elderly neighbors and your neighbors in general to make sure that they're all right. They have small children. If their air conditioner is broken, assist each other and kind of take care of your community. But those resources will all be communicated as broadly as possible. In addition to that, Arches, I know, was out this past weekend. They have some buses they take around to the parks to hand out waters and make sure people are staying hydrated, and check on people that are unhoused to make sure they're taking the precautions they need to stay hydrated. That was a pretty small number for us over a 3-day period with the heat the way it was. That only 12 people felt like they had a heat emergency, and none critical. So that's a good start. It was a short duration. If we start to see longer durations of heat, that's where we get more concerned when we stack multiple days in the high 90s, or we break 100. Day after day after day. If you're unsheltered, that can really wear you down. It's a cumulative effect. So these cooling centers is really the best way for us to get people out of the heat and get them a respite, especially when it doesn't cool down at night. Last year when we had 117 degrees, I think it got down to 80 degrees at night. Well, that's not cooling down. Your body doesn't get a chance to recover at 80 degrees.
So Councilor, I would say the number one location would be the city's Facebook page. I think for most people, that's probably easier to navigate. Although with our update on the city website, that's become easier to navigate. That would be the second location I would recommend people go to.
Yeah, thank you. Those are really important updates. I hope people are listening and paying attention to that. And yeah, that point about it not cooling down at night, like that's when it gets dangerous. And I remember last year I worked every day during the heat dome. And when I left work, Monday morning at like 1 or 2 a.m. and it was still 92 degrees. It didn't get cooler than 92 degrees. That was rough. I'm glad we've avoided that so far this year, but I'm just glad to thinking about this ahead of time. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, very good. We'll move on then to proclamations. We have the canvass of the votes from the primary election on May 17th. Whereas a primary election was held on the 17th day of May 2022, at which candidates for certain offices were voted upon, and whereas the results of the election have been recorded in the minute record of the council, now therefore I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, Oregon, proclaim and declare that at said election, Chris Hoy was duly nominated mayor, Linda Nishioka was duly nominated Councilor Ward 2, Denny Medlock and Deanna Gwynn will have a runoff on November 8th, 2022 for Council Ward 4. Julie Hoy was duly nominated Councilor in Ward 6. Mickey Varney was duly nominated Councilor in Ward 8. Eleanor Beatty was duly nominated Municipal Court Judge. Signed at Salem, Oregon, this 27th day of June, 2022. So congratulations. Okay, and we have a couple of presentations. The Achievement in Community Engagement Award is being presented this evening by Sadie Carney and Leah Rausch.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Bennett and council members. Thanks so much for having me. For the record, my name is Leah Rausch and I live in Eugene. I'm joining you tonight as the chair of Oregon's Citizen Involvement Advisory Committee. So the aim of the CIAC is to increase the public's understanding of and involvement in land use planning. We make recommendations to local governments, to the Department of Land Conservation and Development, or DLCD, and the Land Conservation and Development Commission. So each year we recognize outstanding leadership and best practices for community engagement in land use planning across the state with our Achievement in Community Engagement, or ACE Awards. So I'm really excited to be here with you today and have the pleasure of joining you to recognize the City of Salem, and in particular the Planning Division with the 2022 ACE Award for the Our Salem project. So as I think you all know, our Salem project started in 2018 and is nearing local adoption. I hear that might be happening at the next meeting. And what really impressed our committee members most about the community engagement effort for the Our Salem project was really the staff's willingness to pivot. So early in the process, they saw some deficiencies in their outreach design and took action to address them. Our Salem staff realized in phase 1 of the project that they were not reaching all of Salem's residents, including many communities of color, youth, people with disabilities that were being left out of the conversation. So they then pursued an inclusive engagement process that was sensitive to both the project timeline and the available resources. Communities of color and other underrepresented groups were intentionally engaged in ways that we found to be really meaningful, purposeful, community sensitive, creative, and diverse. So the Salem community, as you all know, is incredibly rich and diverse. The Our Salem effort has touched organizations that serve or represent the Marshallese, Micronesian Islander, Black or African American, Indigenous, and Hispanic and Latino communities, as well as those that work with lower income residents, people with disabilities, seniors, youth, even refugees. This is in addition to civic groups, business organizations, neighborhood groups, builders and developers, advocacy groups, the city's boards and commissions that maybe more typically get engaged in a comprehensive planning process. So while the Our Salem project used many typical tools and methods of community outreach, it was the way that they made them accessible to the community and throughout the community and really tailor their approach for a variety of audiences. That's really what made this project stand out to our committee. A pivot of this nature and recognition that you're not quite hitting your goals is not easy in government, as you all know. And it's really a credit to the planners and your leadership that this process succeeded so wonderfully. The deep community work done by the Our Salem staff is paying dividends as the relationships built in this project are now being leveraged for other purposes. So it's this kind of ongoing investment in our communities that our committee looks for and promotes as a best practice. I can say that personally, I loved watching the video clips from youth forums that were submitted with the proposal and the video of the cross-cultural community development project that was co-hosted with Enlace, all the families and music. Those are just a few examples of the many engagement events mentioned in the application from the city. And of course, most of this work was accomplished during a global pandemic, a circumstance that ultimately puts city staff really to a test and force them to think creatively, engage in new ways, and look for opportunities at a time when we are globally challenged to do many things differently. So as chair of the CIAC, I'm really proud to recognize the city of Salem for their outstanding community engagement efforts for the Our Salem project. And I also want to note quickly that for council members that city staff have been honored not just once, but twice in recent years for their community engagement efforts. In 2018, the community process used in creating the Nesca Lansing neighborhood plan was also recognized with an ACE award. So we're sorry to not be there in person to present this award, but we'll send along a signed ACE award certificate after this meeting. And just want to say congratulations to you all and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much. And Sadie, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Mayor Bennett and council members. I'm just thrilled to be here in attendance at this meeting, having the opportunity to celebrate not only the amazing work that the city of Salem is doing in community engagement, but also in housing and the revitalization of the downtown. As I think many or all of you know, I'm a resident of Salem, and I could not be a prouder resident of Salem. And I just really commend you for the great work that is happening. And I encourage your planning staff to continue applying for these this recognition because they clearly deserve it. And we have honored them more than once. So kudos to them and kudos to all of you. I look forward to listening in on your next meeting.
Great. Thank you, Sadie, very much. Ms. Rutherford, who should we be talking to here besides Eunice, and who else is receiving this? Is the whole planning department? How does this work?
We have Norm Wright is here this evening.
Great. Okay.
And
there
so
he is.
Norm receive it on behalf of the planning department.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Kristen. I'll receive it on behalf of the department, but I want to make it clear that this work is a testament to Lisa Anderson-Ogilvie, Eunice Kim, and Austin Ross for the outstanding work that they continue to do, the tireless effort to make sure that they reach every person they can in the city of Salem and deliver to council the best possible symbol and representation of a vision that they create together with the entire community. So I'll gladly accept it for them, but I want to please make it clear to everyone listening that this work is truly to the credit of Lisa, Eunice, and Austin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. That's great. Ms. Roush, thank you very much for dialing in and sharing this with us. We're very proud of the work they've done, and it shows in the way this is moving through the process. That, as you probably know, comprehensive planning can be, well, it's been 40 years since we really did it seriously. So it's not something you take up every half century. So we're really proud of the work that's been accomplished by Eunice, Lisa, and Austin. So thank you for recognizing them very much. Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I could just add briefly, you know, it's times like these when we're not in the council chambers that we don't have the opportunity for staff to accept an award or get the photo.
Yeah.
So I would like to mention that this is certainly something that we can arrange in the city manager's office. You know, now that people have returned to the office for work So we can certainly schedule something like this to acknowledge staff in person and get the photo with the award for them.
Great. Well, be sure to invite the council as well to join in celebrating.
Absolutely.
I think everybody would appreciate the opportunity to thank these three folks and Mr. Wright as well for the tremendous work that's been done on this. It's been very smooth for several years. It's really been well done. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on then to the Polk County Sheriff and the Polk County District Attorney, Mr. Felton, and the Sheriff. Where'd the Sheriff go? There he is, Mark Garton. You all have a presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I do have a question. Is my screen going to be shared, or am I able to?
If you want it to be, you just share it.
Okay.
I say that like I know what I'm saying, so. Here we go.
This will be brief. So every calendar year, the district attorney and myself are required by statute to look at the law enforcement intentional use of deadly physical force response plan. Senate Bill 111 is what it originally started out as in 2008. And so we have to review it. Doesn't necessarily mean changes need to occur, but if changes do occur, we have to convene a planning committee that involves all the police chiefs within the county, including Chief Womack from Salem, non-union members, union members, and a public member, and then also our tribal police department that we have in our area. And so we met, looked at this plan to determine if there was any changes needed or if it needed to be updated. And they're very, very minor changes that we wanted to include, but one of those changes is really just spelling out specific details that need to be captured when there is an intentional use of deadly physical force by law enforcement. And this plan, or excuse me, it's race, gender, those kind of particulars that hadn't necessarily been laid out word for word in there as it is required in statute. And so what this plan does is it doesn't dictate how an investigation is processed within the agency that's investigating the incident. It's more of a framework so that everyone knows, what should happen generally in the process of the overall investigation when the police officer who used deadly force, when they're able to be interviewed, some mental health precautions as well onto that. And so just everybody's starting at the same level, essentially. Everybody knows what everyone's job is when one of these types of incidents occurs. So we had a public hearing. And then after the public hearing in statute, it requires us to go to each council and ask for approval. After we get the approval, if there's 2/3 out of all of the different entities, we submit it to the Department of Justice, and then they do the final checkoff to make sure it meets statute. And all this stuff is very laid out in statute. It's not, every county's is going to be identical, essentially. Maybe the way it's laid out might look different, but the meat of it is the same because it is spelled out in statute. This doesn't necessarily mean this is how use of force is used. Those are left to the agencies. It is also a state standard that we all apply to. This is just a plan to look at the investigation after the fact. These are essentially just for information. These are the key components of the plan, the requirements in the plan for us to do. And then once all like I said, the police chiefs, myself, the district attorney, all looked at it and we made it to this point essentially, and we're just making the rounds to all the different councils to present this information and to answer questions if there's any, and and then hopefully get an approval. The city councils aren't able to make changes. I mean, we'd be definitely willing to hear information because, and if there's something that we messed up on, we need to go back and fix it. So we'd start the process over again. So it's kind of getting the buy-in and input from each of the police chiefs from the respective areas would hopefully prevent anything from like that from happening, but that is an option as well. Already talked about that. Mr. Felton, do you have anything to add? Maybe not. Okay. So
wait, sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, it's my classic move for these Zoom meetings. Is I'm on mute so that I can't be remembered. But a key concept in this is what the sheriff talked about is transparency, and it's kind of a two-way street. It's transparency not only for our community members, so they know how these investigations are conducted, what to expect when one of these incidents occurs. But it's also transparency for the involved officers or deputies, so they know going in what is going to happen in one of these investigations. And Sheriff is exactly right. This is not designed to dictate to the individual law enforcement agencies what their internal policies are in terms of use of force. That's a separate issue. But it is very important that, as I said, policymakers such as this body, other councils know what is going on, and so they can talk about that with their constituencies. And really, and I think Sheriff talked about that, even though at this level, this body cannot necessarily make changes to it. However, it is important that we get feedback from you so that the planning committee for this policy can make changes if necessary, if there's something that has been left out or something that policymakers at the council level say this should be added or modified, because if that wasn't a critical role, why would we bring it to you, basically? And why would we be in a forum where we're seeking the feedback rather than just seeking consent, basically? So we do sincerely want to hear questions, feedback, so that when and if these incidents occur, I don't like to say when, we have been remarkably, since I've been district attorney, fortunate in that we have had just a very few incidents of deadly force being implemented. And, it's less, I say a handful, it's less than 10 since I've been DA in 2013, thank goodness, that we've had to trigger this policy or implement this policy.
Aaron, is just one question. Is there anything going different between what you all have come up with your policy and what's going on in Marion County? Are they pretty much the same? Is this pretty well standardized now as a result of state law?
Well, Mayor Bennett, I'm glad you asked that question, because part of what we have done over the years is to try and bring together the two practices and policies to be similar to what Marion County does, because as you know, with the Salem Police Department and our communities in general, because there is so much interplay between both Marion and Polk counties, not just between our Salem Police Department, but between my office and the Marion County DA's office, that I really made it a goal to try and have as much compatibility as possible, not only with these policies, but how I implement these policies in terms of if, for example, an officer-involved shooting happens, I've elected to take these to grand jury the same way they do it in Marion County, because I think it's important that our police officers know what to expect and have consistency in that expectation. Also, our citizens who live in West Salem and other parts of Salem just have a common feel and expectation for when these things happen, so that you don't have one practice in West Salem for example, a use of deadly force than in South Salem, for example. And I thought that was important, and we've made that happen over the years. So I'm glad you asked that question. So the short answer is yes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your deadly force policy, are there considerations made for language barriers, hearing deficits, mental illness, intellectual disabilities, things of those nature. And the reason why I mention those things is that one thing that all of those challenges have in common is the ability to follow officer directions. Like stop resisting, pull over your car, all of those instructions that officers expect to be followed, which oftentimes is a precursor to whether to use deadly force or not. Does the policy take into consideration these various challenges that people may have to following officers' instructions?
So this framework, it doesn't get into the weeds that far down. This is more about the requirements upon the agencies to have a specific process lined out for the investigation. The use of force itself is those are generated by the department or the agency that is having them. So, which then is derived from state statute and from just good practice. So it's not meant to replace that, if that makes sense.
So what you're saying is that when it comes to the use of force policy, whether it's deadly force or any use of force, you're relying on the same statewide statutes that talk about when and how to use force involving individuals who may have difficulties following instructions for a variety of reasons.
Yes, and in this framework, it's a requirement to include all of the use of force policies from each specific agency, so that when the Department of Justice is able to look at it at the end, they can verify that those requirements are the state statute requirements that aren't specific to this, except for the requirement for us to include the use of force policies within this document. They make sure on the back end that standards are being met in terms of use of force.
And perhaps I should add another piece to that, Councilor Nordyke. The next step is after a use of force has happened and an investigation has occurred, then it does sort of transition over to my office in a presentation to the grand jury. Issues such as you outlined, mental health issues, hearing challenges, other things that may impact or affect how a person who was involved in the use of deadly force, whether it's the officer or the person who may be deceased as a result of the use of deadly force, all those circumstances going into that use are then reviewed by the grand jury. And so then those issues you've outlined are very relevant to their decision-making process when that case is presented. But again, as you can understand, that process is separate from this particular Senate Bill 111 policy that we're outlining tonight. That is a case-by-case piece that involves a legal presentation and a criminal presentation, really, potentially to the grand jury and their assessment of whether the use of deadly force was justified or not as defined by Oregon statute, based on the facts and evidence presented to that particular grand jury.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Sheriff, for taking the time to come talk to us. In thinking about these policies, I'm assuming that they've been under a microscope. They've always been under a microscope. These last few years, though, just been a extreme emphasis on some of these issues. They've been highlighted. And the way information travels is so fast nowadays. Of these policies, what have you seen lately or recently that's been a change? What's changed? What's evolved? How different is this set? Is this set from prior years? Anything like you can share with us on that end?
On the street level, obviously, Oregon is very specific, and they think the legislature thinks about things in terms of how do we make things safer, and those are always occurring, and so our world changes day by day. Sometimes, depending on the court rulings and things that we have to abide by. But the actual, the justification of use of force, and that all falls to the district attorney to the presentation of the case to the grand jury. There's also kind of there's a trend, I would say, that when I'm trying to think of a good example. when an officer is required to use, or not required, but is justified in using deadly physical force, it's traumatic for everyone involved. And part of this plan addresses basically the ongoing care for those officers that were involved in that, because that is something that in the past hasn't been a focus at all. It's just, go to work, do your job. But if we put the ground rules out ahead of time, and the legislature's been actually very vocal about having this type of test, or mental health check-ins, or whatever you want to call it after the fact, is a very proactive step, and something that a lot of people may not realize affects law enforcement, but it does. So.
Very good. Anyone else? Great. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming in to talk with us about this. So good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Move to public comment. I've got two folks signed up to comment. Suzanne Kaltwasser. Suzanne, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak at this time on the agenda. My name is Suzanne Kaltwasser. I reside in Ward 8, and I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Cleaner Air Now Coalition, which is a group of local, state, and national organizations that work for zero waste and for accountability to incinerators. And I'm here just to remind you that last December, you had a discussion about a project that we had proposed called Pay As You Throw on garbage rates. And staff was directed or asked by a couple of councilors to look into that and report back this year. And our organization is concerned that with inflation and other factors changing with the incinerator and its ownership, that the haulers may be coming back with very large increased requests for waste disposal rates. And so we'd like to get a jump ahead on that so that we don't end up like we did last year, where we couldn't talk about this program because there was not enough time, and you ended up not increasing the rates, which was good. But our ultimate goal is zero waste, to reduce waste generation. And so a pay-as-you-throw, we believe, is an effective way to encourage people to recycle more, to compost more, and to reduce what they throw. And also, we're not looking for a dramatic change. We're just looking at potential change in the schedule for pickup so that people can have more control over their household budgets and more predictability in what it costs. I also know that you have or at least I heard that you have a program for people on low income, elderly, and so forth. I haven't been able to find it yet, but when you look at rates, we'll hope that you'll also look at that relief program. We would be willing to meet with staff or members of City Council to discuss this further prior to when this shows up on your agenda, probably in late November, December, so that maybe we'll have some potential to work on this together. If there's any questions.
Any questions for Suzanne? Peter, sorry, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too remember when we asked staff for some sort of a report back on this, and I don't think we've seen it yet. So I'm hoping we'll get something about that from the staff before we have to make another decision on garbage rates.
Let's see if Mr. Fernandez has any thoughts on, who is it? Josh? Who's going to talk to us about this?
Good evening, Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer. I think it can be a discussion of your upcoming policy agenda work session about where to put it in the priority list for your consideration. But we are actively working with the haulers on a rate proposal.
Right now, you're working with them?
Yes.
How would a group like the Clean Air Now Coalition and the pay-as-you-throw concept, how does it involve itself in that process? Is that is that open? How is that set up?
So the process with the haulers is really closed. It's with their financials and things, but we definitely entertain a conversation with the group to discuss their proposal.
Great. So if Suzanne Kaltwasser contacted you, you'd take care of whatever needs to be done?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, Suzanne, there's your contact person right now and the staff that's working on that. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that maybe there's a little bit of confusion on the timeline, or maybe I'm confused. I think we did ask for that report, and I think we did get the response back from staff, and they recommended to not adopt the proposal. And so I definitely think that more conversation is warranted if we want to look more at creative ways to address our garbage rates. And that's certainly something I've been pushing for my 5 years on council, but we've yet to make real meaningful headway. So I would love to be involved in that conversation.
May I comment?
Yes.
I do recall the staff saying some sort of response, but they were misinterpreting what we were asking for. We weren't asking for the pay-as-you-throw program that had separate containers or bags and so on and so forth. We're just talking about, for example, an option to not have your garbage picked up every week, but maybe every other week, like they do with recycling and yard waste, and then be some benefit or incentive through what it costs so that more people would choose that option. We hear a lot of people who already get the 20 gallons and find that even that is too much space, and they right now they're not putting their garbage out every week, and they just like to have an incentive in the rates so that they could control their household budget better.
Right. Good. Well, I do again contact Josh, and we'll make sure he makes contact with Councilor Hoy, Councilor Anderson, any others of you that are interested, so we know what's going on. You all know what's going on as this comes forward. Councilor Nordyke.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Kaltwasser for her testimony, and I'm supportive of exploring this further as well. I think we already have started down the pay-as-you-throw path, but there's a lot more that we can do to be supportive and address climate change through all manner of waste control. So I'm very much in favor of us pushing further.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne, very much. Betsy Belshaw.
Okay, am I there? Yes.
You are here.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'm Betsy Belshaw, and I live in Ward 8. And I'm here on behalf of the Minto Brown Park Patrol, of which I am a member, and the citizens park users of the city of Salem, of which I am also am a member. I have noticed that, again, there is no additional park ranger in the budget. And as I told Norm several years ago, I'm going to keep like a mosquito in your ear until we get another park ranger. The idea that we have one park ranger covering 46 or 100 parks, depending upon how you count them, is preposterous. And since there have been two recent incidents, and the fact that our marvelous park ranger, who does a great job of educating and is extremely tolerant, has done a superb job, but some of the duress that he is under, and also park employees, is inexcusable, and we need to do something about it. And certainly, I'd say 6 more park rangers would help, but I'm not going to be greedy. I'd settle for 1 so that when he's not there, because he only works 40 hours a week, somebody else might cover. So I'm just here to be the mosquito in your ear again, saying, please, nobody thinks that we don't need them. I have not heard from anybody who says we don't need another park ranger. So for heaven's sake, can we get it in the budget? Amen.
Thank you, Betsy. Kristen, what happened to the park ranger in the budget?
There was not one included in the proposed budget.
That's correct.
The city manager's proposed budget was a status quo proposed budget.
Right.
Seems to have grown a bit, but okay. Well, you hear the plea. I hope as we look forward, we can take another look, because Betsy will come back. I can assure you of that.
Yes, I will. And I may be down on the floor praying next time, but I may not be able to get up. So you better get me up in front of you saying, please, can we do something about this before something terrible happens? Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I don't have anyone else signed up. So we'll go to the consent calendar. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar with the exception of item 3.3A pulled by Councilor Nordyke. That's a late pull. We didn't talk about it earlier.
Okay. Second by.
Mr. Mayor, I also wanted to pull 3.3B.
And excuse me, we still need a second.
I'll second.
Thank you.
So Nordyke, you want 3.3A and 3.3B?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, Councilor Hoy?
Ready to restate my motion, or are we good?
I think I think it's mainly, I think we know it's 3.A and B, and go ahead with the others that are left.
Thank you. That leaves us with item 3.1A, the June 13th, 2022 drafts council minutes. 3.2A, consideration of real property brokerage policy. Item 3.2B, state shared revenues. Item 3.2C, adoption of the fiscal year 2023 City of Salem budget. Item 3.2D, transfer of fiscal year 2022 year-end budget appropriations. Item 3.3C, a lease with Avis Budget Car Rental LLC. Item 3.3D, compensation for the classifications of assistant director, city engineer, city librarian, deputy city attorney, and division manager. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Very good. Any discussion? Yes, Councilor.
I would just note that in the meeting minutes states that I declared a conflict of interest in relation to the capital improvement plan. That is correct. I just want to be clear for the record, that was a potential conflict of interest, which is why I still voted on the matter. That's the only amendment I would make to the minutes.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, Amy, if you'd please call the roll.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung. Still absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We have, I'll move on then to public hearings. We have one public hearing. Amy, do you want to?
Sure. The Salem City Council will now conduct a public hearing to consider the petitioner-initiated annexation of territory located at 3518 to 3598 Cherry Glen Place Northeast. The criteria applicable to the decision is SRC 260.060C. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing in person or in writing, or failure to provide statements or evidence with sufficient specificity to provide the parties and the city council an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes actions for damages in circuit court. The hearing will begin with staff presentation and no individual signed up to testify. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Olmsted?
All right, good evening. So I'm Liz Olmsted. I'm one of the newest planners in the planning division. So tonight before you, I have annexation. Oh, that is incorrect. I apologize. An annexation for 3518, 3598 Cherry Glen Place Northeast. So the proposed annexation is 6.87 acres. The comprehensive plan of multifamily residential in City of Salem request for RM2 zone. The territory is proposed for annexation into the city. Territory annexed into the city is automatically given the comprehensive plan designation that is equivalent to the applicable county zoning designations in Table 260 unless the petitioner requests a new comprehensive plan designation or zone designation other than the equivalent city designation in Table 260-1. The equivalent city designation in Table 260-1 is inconsistent with the City of Salem Area Comprehensive Plan, or the City Council proposes a new comprehensive plan designation or zone other than the equivalent city designation. The equivalent city designation is RM1 or RM2, which is consistent with the multifamily residential comprehensive plan designation. And as I stated before, the petitioner is requesting RM2 zoning. Before you on this slide is an aerial photo of the territory and surrounding properties. The territory is located east of I-5, South Ward Drive Northeast, and west of Fisher Road Northeast, across the street from Fisher Road Park. The property is developed with 7 apartment buildings with 120 apartment homes and 243 parking spaces, which were approved by Marion County and completed in 2021. The properties north across Ward Drive Northeast are occupied by church and single-family dwellings, and the properties to the east across Fisher Road are occupied by single-family dwellings in Fisher Road Park. The abutting property to the south is vacant land owned by Oregon State ODOT, and the properties to the west are developed with multifamily apartments and condominiums. The comprehensive plan designation is multifamily residential in the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan. Surrounding properties are designated multifamily residential and single-family residential. The subject property is zoned Marion County multiple family residential. The properties to the north are zoned Marion County multiple family residential and single family residential. The properties to the east are zoned Marion County urban development, multifamily residential, and City of Salem public amusement. The properties to the south are zoned City of Salem multiple family residential 2, and the properties to the west are zoned Marion County multiple family residential and City of Salem multiple family residential 2. Staff finds that the proposed annexation met the annexation criteria, including whether it's consistent with the comprehensive plan and statewide planning goals, allows orderly, efficient, and timely provision of urban services, and serves the public interest. There were some comments received from the Northgate Neighborhood Association. They submitted questions regarding development standards and timeline for development. So the questions regarding development standards were addressed in the earlier slide, and the effective date for the annexation is approximately August 25th, 2022. City and agency comments, the Parks Department and Fire and Finance all submitted some comments regarding the annexation, and no comments were received from Salem Kaiser School District. Under Senate Bill 1573, adopted March 15, 2006, the proposed annexation may not be referred to the voters because the owner signed an annexation petition and the territory is in the urban growth boundary subject to the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan and contiguous to the city limits. So although the annexation may not be referred to the voters, council retains the authority on whether to annex the territory. So staff recommends that council adopt order number 2022-12 ANX, determining that the proposal meets the applicable criteria, applying the zoning for the territory and approving withdrawal from the territory from Marion County Fire District 1 and East Salem Sewer and Drainage District. And thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you. As Ms. Olmston said, there was no member of the public to testify, so it's a chance for councilors to ask any questions. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the first things I always do when we get these sort of things is I look at the map, and I've got the map here because I see where it is. And this is an extremely minor point, but I have been known to make extremely minor points before. The inset map shows West Salem, Glen Creek Road, Brush College Road. That's Ward 8, and the map where we're looking at now is Northeast Salem, Ward 5. And so I don't know if that makes any difference in the city attorney's view, but perhaps we ought to at least recognize that the inset map is not the right map.
It doesn't make any difference, but thank you for pointing it out.
Sure.
Okay, anyone else have any questions, comments? I'm going to close the public hearing, and Councilor Gonzalez, do you want to give us a motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I make a motion that we approve staff recommendation to adopt order number 2022-12.
Second.
Second by Anderson. Any discussion? Okay, Amy, could you please call the roll?
Councilor Leung, still absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Barney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Okay, we'll move then to special orders of business. 5A has been removed from this agenda, be put on a later agenda. 5B, consideration of projects. This is all words, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move we adopt the list of projects for the community improvement bond recommended by steering committee and direct staff to return to council with the resolution to refer the measure to Salem voters at the November 2022 general election.
Second.
Second by Stapleton. Okay, Councilor Hoy, do you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had quite an extensive process with a subcommittee and a lot of public testimony, public input. We've gone over the list. We've made some additions. We've made a lot of subtractions, and we've come up with what we think is our best proposal. I know we're probably going to have a couple of potential amendments to that list tonight, but I think what we have is a really solid list of projects. It's comprehensive in nature. I think we tried to look at all parts of the city and all of the different ways that we needed help. And it's amazing how fast $300 million can go to zero when you start dealing with projects of this magnitude. It's really stunning how fast that's the case. But here we are, and I'm excited to support the list that we approved tonight.
Thank you, Councilor. I certainly agree with you, having worked with on that committee as well. This is just a really good list that serves the broad community, has really been thought through. So real excited about seeing it moving forward, and let's get to work on this bond measure. It's desperately needed in this community. This is an infrastructure bond that needs to move forward. Okay. Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion to amend. So I believe this was sent out to folks this afternoon, and it's a lengthy motion, so I'll speak slowly. And my intention, of course, in bringing the motion is to invite conversation. And I will speak to my motion after I've read it off. So the motion is to add sidewalk infill at Davis Road and other improvements for $7.6 million to this bond measure. In exchange for adding 7.6, city staff have proposed making the following reductions: allocating $400,000 from State Street to the Davis Road project, reducing the $7.5 million Safer Pedestrian Crossings project to $3.54 million, and reallocating funds to Davis Road. Eliminating the bridge railing replacement from the 15th Street Bridge Improvement Project for $450,000. And it's important to point out that the structural component of the 15th Street Bridge would remain funded at $460,000. Then reduce the $7.5 million sidewalk infill project to $6 million, reallocating the $1.5 to Davis Road. And last but not least, reducing the $10 million sidewalk replacement project to $8.71 million. With all of those reductions in place, that should amount to the $7.6 million needed to bring forth the project in Davis Road.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Hoy.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I want to turn briefly to interim city manager Kristen Rutherford. Ms. Rutherford, my understanding is that we have some other buckets of money that can fund these sidewalk and other safe crossing projects that I've suggested making reductions to. Can you confirm that?
So the extra funding is for the Safe Crossings project. There is no extra bucket for doing the sidewalk infill or sidewalk repair, but there is other funding for the Safe Crossing projects for about $3.5 million. We have projects that were included on under the concept for the original $7.5 million that are included in some of the urban upgrade projects. And so they will be funded or can be funded from that rather from the Safe Crossings bucket. Peter Fernandez or Brian Martin may be able to speak more specifically about which projects those are, but we did find that there is capacity for additional funding by paying for those out of the projects rather than the Safer Crossing bucket. Additionally, there's newer grant programs that we are aware of that weren't contemplated when we first started developing this list several months ago that we are applying for funds through. So between moving them from one bucket to specific projects and the grant programs that are now available, that adds more resources for the Safe Crossings. Peter, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Well, I'd like to have you add something, Peter. I would like, or you, Kristen, what is the net impact on various projects? Particularly, I'm looking at sidewalk projects around the, that are included in the bond. What's in, what's out? Or is that the right way to look at this?
Well, so this proposal, this motion would reduce the sidewalk infill bucket of funding by $1.5 million. And it would reduce the sidewalk replacement bucket by $1.3 million about. So that, because they're buckets, so because they're buckets, we're not talking about specific projects.
Okay. And so that would be decided by the council in a future action? Is that
yes.
the concept?
Okay. That's right. When we start going through project development.
Okay. Councilor Phillips?
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor Nordyke, for the motion. I think I understand what the proposal is in the broad strokes. I didn't get a chance to review it in much detail ahead of time, but I'm listening with an open mind. Is it like accurate, if I paraphrase it in the broadest sense and attempt to comprehend it right now, that the reduction in the buckets were picked because in effect, we're being prescriptive and we're doing what those buckets would have done. We're just picking which projects now? Is that kind of why we looked at decreasing those buckets by the amount?
So yes, because there's a sidewalk infill component to the Davis urban upgrade project. So, yeah, so part of that is sidewalk infill. So if you were looking at $7.5 million of sidewalk infill in totality, which is how we're doing this. We're not, as a part of this process, allocating it to specific projects. What this does is take some of that sidewalk infill money out of the bigger lump sum and allocates it now to a specific project, along with other funding from other sources to totally fund that urban upgrade.
A follow-up question, if I may, that's a little unrelated. So, you know, I've had family that used to live in this area. So it's been 10 years almost since I've known anybody out there, but I'm familiar with the Davis Road and, you know, it's growing. There's a lot of new develop happening in that part of town. And there's the middle school there as well. Does this help with, you know, also addressing some of the safer routes to school and fill in some of the missing infrastructure in that area along Davis Road? I mean, I assume it is. And I guess my big question would be, does this score almost as high as some of the other projects that were initially picked based on, you know, broad benefit to the community?
I will let our Public Works Director speak to that one.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. Councilor Peter Fernandez, Public Works Director. We have had requests for years to do exactly what this project does because of the things that you mentioned. You know, you having lived out there, you understand it, that there's big chunks of missing sidewalk. It's a significant growth area. And this project comes with the signal at Liberty and Davis, which is important. That's right on the corner where Crossler Middle School is located. One of the reasons that we did not propose it originally is a lot of these improvements are being done by developers. So this project advances that. The problem is, and I asked my development services staff this, and they predicted that we would not see completion of those projects out there for at least a decade, just as development comes through. So by putting it on the bond, what it does is it assures that we're going to complete it. We're going to complete it appropriately. We're going to address a little bit of the pavement issues in the older parts, and we in fact get that signal installed all in a timely manner.
And then final question, are any of the structural components to the weight limited bridges, are any of those being swapped out, or is this purely the non-structural components that are being swapped out?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nordyke had it correct. The motion is to remove the handrail improvement, but not the structural component of that bridge on 15.
Okay, thank you.
No, there is no sacrifice to the structural pieces.
Okay.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this amendment to the motion, even though I think Davis Road is probably as far away from my ward as you can get and still be in the city. I hear about that area a lot in terms of traffic concerns and pedestrian concerns, and I think that signal is going to be huge. And I do want to remind the other councilors who didn't have the benefit of the discussion of the committee that the whole sidewalk bucket was added by the council members of the committee, as we saw it as an important feature. But I think reducing it by this modest amount will still get us where we need to be. And as a second reminder, we still have the money within the budget that we included a few years ago for sidewalk repair and sidewalk work that was in addition to any bond money. So it's not like that's the only bucket of sidewalk money there is. in the bond. We also have the money in our budget as well. So I think this is a good proposal, and I'm supportive of it.
Mr. Fernandez, will this also then be backfilled over time, over that 10-year period you described, by developer contribution as they develop the land and become responsible for these improvements?
So the answer to that, Mayor, is a little nuanced. We have not, as a community, since the early 80s, done any kind of assessments for projects that are bond funded. Once we bond fund them, they're done, and whoever's an adjacent property owner benefits from it, the community has paid for it. However, there are a couple of things going on out in that area. The first is that there may be, and I have not done the research, there may be projects that still owe us improvements on Davis Road. So if they owe us some improvement, or there's some projects that are already underway, we're going to let them finish. Projects that have not, if the bond passes and there are developments that have Davis Road improvements as a condition of development, we will seek a fee in lieu of construction. So we will tag them to reimburse the project. But if there are future projects, and there may be properties out there that would benefit, we are not recommending, because we really have not done it anywhere for a very long time. Yeah. So we would not recommend any kind of reimbursement or assessment district for anybody that has not already been approved for development.
Do you have any feeling for how much property we're talking about will be able to slide through this kind of exception? That
has not already been approved. There are 3 fairly substantial properties that are still in the county, inside the UGB, but outside of the city, that are already getting the curb improvements from another project. So this would just be the sidewalk piece. There are some properties along Liberty, just to the west of Liberty, that I believe a lot of them are already approved for development. So if they owe us that, we would have them pay the fee.
Okay.
I don't think there's any more properties to the north of Davis. So I don't think there's a lot.
Not a lot? Good. Okay.
I don't think there's a whole lot.
I think there's a question of fairness, and it sounds like it's pretty well resolved inside of this.
We believe that it is, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Tom, I'm sorry. You're on mute.
Oh, that's all right, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fernandez, I thought I understood this until you started talking again, and now I'm just a little confused. I want to focus in on the SDCs. So what I think I heard you say was that if this bond measure passes, future development, there will not be transportation SDCs charged to those developers. But instead there will be some sort of fee in lieu of SDCs. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct, Councilor.
Okay.
I'm not talking about transportation SDCs. Everybody owes those. What I'm talking about is if there is a development that has as a condition of approval an improvement to Davis, okay, so over and above the SDCs.
Okay.
That they already have an approval. One of the conditions is to improve Davis. They have not started. Then in that case, if the bond passes, we would charge them a fee in lieu of constructing Davis, because they already owed us Davis.
So
what I'm talking about is any properties, any undeveloped properties that do not yet have a development approval, they would not owe us. They would benefit. They would still pay their transportation SDCs, but they would benefit from the fact that the street is completed.
Sure. And so what you're saying is, in effect, the bond measure, if this amendment is passed, the city would be doing the work that the developers might be charged for in the future.
Correct. If they owed it to us, we would do the project. We would charge them some amount, because they already owed it to us, so they don't get a free ride.
Okay, and the amount that you would charge, how does that, I understand now SDCs aren't involved in this. SDCs are already there and they're going to be for other things. rather than sidewalk and various improvements required by the development. But the fee in lieu of, how does that relate to what the city actually would have spent to do these improvements under the bond measure?
Yeah, we will typically, what we typically do in those situations is we see how much, we rarely charge them what we pay because of hourly wage requirements, we have to pay a lot more. But we will do the math on what projects, for example, we know what it's been costing because we do some SDC reimbursements. So just based on a per frontage, per square foot, whatever it is that they owe us, we would require some kind of payment in lieu based on that math.
Is it Virginia? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to kind of zoom in on something with the director here. When you mentioned that we haven't really done maybe an audit or an inventory of developments that maybe owe us some money for this kind of work since maybe the 80s or so. Did I understand that correctly?
No, no, you did not, Councilor. I said two different things. What I said was that this idea of assessing adjoining property owners for a project that the city did back before my research shows that before sort of the early 80s, the city would come in and do a street project, and then the city would assess adjoining property owners, certainly for the sidewalk improvements, if not for some of the improvements. So we'd get some money back from the adjoining property owners. We have not done that as a city since the early 80s. Why that practice was stopped, I don't know, but that's the last time that we did it. So what I'm saying is for this project, I don't recommend doing an assessment. What I was saying in response to the mayor was in response to the mayor's question specifically, how many properties are those? And I know for a fact that there are 3 properties that are currently inside the UGB, but outside of the city that do not have development approvals. Beyond that, most of the fronting properties do have development approvals and either have already done projects out on Davis or are getting ready to. It would be those properties that we would make an assessment on if they owe us Davis. What I don't have information on is how many of those properties there are out at Davis.
Thanks for clearing that
up. Councilor Phillips?
Yeah, just briefly, and listening to this, I'm persuaded, quite easily that this sounds like this is a well thought out, savvy, high yield recommendation that won't just benefit Ward 7, but all the city Salem in a fair way. So I intend to support this amendment, and I appreciate everybody working with Councilor Nordyke to bring this high yield amendment to our consideration.
Okay, anyone else? Councilor Nordyke, could you, because I don't have a copy of it written in front of me, besides this sidewalk bucket, what other buckets are affected by this? What other, and the bridge railings or something like that, but is there anything else? I mean, Peace Plaza at one point was being talked about, other things. That's all off the table, right?
Mr. Mayor, the Peace Plaza is not a part of my motion. I'll just restate it because I see Councilor Leung has joined us, so I think it might be helpful to read it off one more time. I believe it may have been, this motion I believe was circulated this afternoon, but I know we get a lot of information last minute. So 7.6 million for Davis Road, which includes completing sidewalks, curbs, and installing the traffic light at Liberty and Davis, which is key for calming traffic. You've probably saw Sally Cook in your materials. The neighborhood has been wanting this for 10 years. They don't want to wait another 10 years. We have children who cannot safely access Crossler. We have lots of senior citizens in the area who can't safely access Secor Park. And she did such a great job spelling it out. So if you haven't had an opportunity to read her letter, you should. In exchange for Davis Road, I'm asking to make reductions to the safe pedestrian crossings bucket, reducing it to 3.54 million, eliminating the non-structural improvements to the 15th Street Bridge, and reducing the sidewalk infill projects to about, I think it was 2.2 million total. So
Great.
that would be the overall impact. And as interim director, manager Rutherford mentioned, we do have some other buckets of funds available, at least for the safe crossings portion.
Well, it sounds like potentially for sidewalks, it's just a lot of other potential funds out there.
Right.
Councilor
Yeah. We just don't
Rutherford?
have a crystal ball. And I appreciate the staff I appreciate the fact that our staff doesn't speculate. They know that we want to hold them accountable to any numbers they give us. And I appreciate that. So I thank you for saying there could be other stuff out there, but not giving us some speculative number either.
Councilor Rutherford or Manager Rutherford, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to share that there is another motion that Councilor Stapleton has that will speak to Peace Plaza and to State Street, and then also share and make clear to all of those in our neighborhood associations and community members that after this motion, there will still be $6 million of the 7.5 for sidewalk infill. There will still be 8.7 million of 10 million for sidewalk replacement. So we still have funds for those programs.
Okay, very good. Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Yes, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The money we were just talking about, the interim manager Rutherford, that is included in the bond measure.
That is correct.
Okay, so it's not, I know that's been a real concern about the inner city neighborhoods as opposed to the neighborhoods out on the fringe, in terms that we haven't been getting the sidewalks done in the inner city. So what you're saying is we will still have 8,700,000 and someplace else some more money. I forget what
6 million.
Yeah, 6 million. So we will still have in this project $14.7 million for sidewalks.
Correct.
And that does not include whatever we might spend on Davis Road for sidewalks.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Varney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm overall supportive of the project. I was on the steering committee, and you know, at the very beginning, I remember doing a lot of prioritization and trying to understand the scoring. And I think the committee did a really good job of pulling things together with staff's help and explanations. But this Davis Road project, I'm supportive of it. We especially need that light at Liberty and Davis, and I appreciate the questions you, the mayor, and councilors have asked, because I had the same concerns about the development and the fees. I did have one question for Director Fernandez, maybe. The equity score, well, this project was in the tier 2 of our projects, and the equity score was 2 on it. What does that really mean? Can you explain it?
I cannot, Councilor. Brian Martin is on the call, and I hope he has an answer for you.
Thank you.
Brian, there.
Good evening, Councilor. Yeah, there was actually a typo in that score of a 2. It actually should have been a score of a 6.
Okay.
And that's out of a maximum of 10. So it actually scored well, but there was a typo on that score.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. Thanks. I don't have any other questions.
Okay. I'll set to vote then on the amendment. Okay. Amy, if you could call the roll. Oh. Amy, could you call the roll?
I sure will. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leon.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion, the amendment passes. Motion for the amendment. Now, yes, Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you so much. Yes, I would like to move to restore $700,000 to the Peace Plaza improvements by reducing the State Street project by an additional $700,000, and that will then restore the Union Street family-friendly bikeway project to its entirety, and also the Peace Plaza.
Second.
Thank you. So as many of you guys know, I ran for office, and one of the top priorities that I had was connecting our bike infrastructure. And this motion here, coupled with the motion that Councilor Hoy made at our steering committee task force meeting that we had, oh Lord, was that 2 weeks ago now? And that really will complete the Union Street connection. And this is really vital to the bike infrastructure that we have here in the city of Salem. And if we get this bond passed and we have the completion of Marine Drive and the State Street project, we will then have a fully protected and connected bike infrastructure from Harriet Drive Northeast all the way to from Harriet Drive Northwest all the way to 17th Street Northeast. And this is really critical, I feel, especially as we look towards climate change, where in the next 13 years is when we're going to be able to meet our first benchmark for our climate action goal of a 50% reduction in emissions. And providing these options for alternative transportation is going to be key for us to reach that goal. I also do want to say thank you to all of the people who wrote in and talked about how important bike infrastructure was to them and the goals that they had for their future, sharing their personal stories. Some of them were horrific. Some of them were just delightful and wonderful to see the breadth and width of folks who are riding their bike here in Salem. So thank you to all of those people. And I know that this doesn't complete the task, but it does give us a really great start on what I hope to be a really great future full of a fully protected and connected bike infrastructure in the city of Salem. So I hope you all will help support me in this motion.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Stapleton, for bringing this amendment. I'm very excited to support this. As you mentioned, I made the motion to include the Union Street bike connection in our committee. And, this is, as a former board member of Salem Bicycle Club, cycling is really important to me. And I know how important it is to our city. And this connection is going to make a world of difference in order to allow us to get, like you said, clear from Harriet Drive all the way over to 17th, and where we can connect into other things and other projects that are moving on. So this is really exciting. And I'm also really excited to see a little bit of the money coming back to the Peace Plaza. I think that's an important piece of our infrastructure. And the sacrifice that we're making at State Street, I think, is minimal. That project is still going to be full. It's going to be a rich project over there on State Street. We're just not getting those left turn or the right turn lanes, I guess it is, that would actually widen the streets even further. I think it's actually a better project by eliminating those turn lanes. So I'm really excited to support this motion.
Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am declaring a potential conflict of interest because a member of my family owns a building on State Street, which would be potentially impacted by this proposal. And by way of background, I checked in with our city attorney and the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. We had numerous conversations about whether I could participate in any of the conversations. So I declare a potential conflict of interest with discussion of our entire infrastructure bond measure. But I wanted to be sure that I said this is all because we own one building on State Street out of a $300 million bond. So now that I've declared the potential conflict, as we all know, when you declare potentials, you can still participate in the deliberations and vote. And I will be voting yes on this. I am a big believer in having bicycle-friendly cities for a variety of reasons. You can make the case for it for climate action. You can make the case for it for livability. And you can make the case for equity as well. For a number of folks who cannot afford a car, a bicycle or being on foot are your only options to get to your job, your medical appointments, your home, your school, and so on. So this is a very modest ask that I think Councilor Stapleton has made, and I really appreciate her efforts to champion specifically creating a family-friendly bikeway project. This will have an impact for the entire city. I'm very supportive of that, and I understand why it is necessary. So that is why I will be voting yes.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm echoing comments that everybody else has made, and I think you all know that I have ridden my bicycle to every city council meeting. So of course I'm in favor of bicycling for all the reasons we talk about: equity, climate action, you name it. It's all important in this. And as someone whose ward goes up to State Street, I think now it's with the redistricting, it's now on the other side of State Street. It goes up to Corridor Chemeketa now. This has been a big concern about the people who live in that area. And I think the operating under, I guess, what I'll call the Gary Obery theory from North Broadway when we looked at the turn lane, I think turn lanes in the context of climate action, in the context of encouraging alternate ways to travel other than motor vehicles, whether they're single occupancy or double occupancy, that doesn't make much of a difference. So I'm going to vote for this too. And thanks for bringing it, Councilor Stapleton.
Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Stapleton, for this high yield amendment. I think it's very savvy, well thought out, targeted, and like you said it, and others have said before me, it really creates a foundation for protected, connected, bicycle without really costing us anything. And it's a win-win-win. So well done. And I'm thrilled to be able to support this. And I think that this helps us be on a great foot, when we move towards facing with the broader community to get package of this utterly essential infrastructure bill that's needed here in our community. So I'll be a strong yes.
Councilor, I also want to thank you for your work on this, getting this forward and getting it really, actually, I think, to completion. I started on this 15 years ago. Councilor Kara Kaiser worked on it through the Transportation Systems Plan, and herself as councilor. Seeing this getting finished is really gratifying. I'm really thank you very much for bringing this forward at this point. This is one of those where you spend your time on them. You wonder if you'll ever see them, particularly having worked on State Street two-way. You can see how that goes over the decades, and Court Street. All of these take so much time. So seeing one completed, I really appreciate you doing this, and also maintaining the funding for Peace Plaza. I think that is a very important project, part of our city infrastructure. And a turn lane on 17th Street, someday maybe, why? I don't know. I'm not sure you need one. So I'm glad to see the money move to a project we know we need, which is Union Street. Seeing Northeast Salem directly connected by bicycle to Riverfront Park was something it's what got me going on it. I discovered riding my bike to Riverfront Park was a very, very exciting thing to do from Northeast Salem. So thank you very much for that. Councilor Stapleton.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to say thanks to you, your kind words, and to the work that you have done in the past and those who went before me on this Union Street project. I think it's really a critical piece of infrastructure for our city. And thank you to all of the fellow councilors here tonight who are so supportive. And for those of you who are excited about bike infrastructure in this bond, just remembering that this project is over $5 million and for bike infrastructure, and couple that with all of the other projects that we're doing, the bicycle infrastructure within the bond total is equaling 15 million total. And so this is really a game changer for folks. And I can't wait to see it hopefully pass, and that we can see all this good work come to fruition.
Very good. Yes, Councilor Barney.
Well, I too wanted to say thank you, Councilor Stapleton, for sticking with this, and I'm just really glad to see it as a definite possibility. I'm supportive of it also because of Marine Drive, obviously, so that folks have an alternative where they can bike and walk and not have to go right along Wallace. And then the whole connection all the way to 17th. I haven't ridden bikes for quite a while, but I might be convinced to do so once I can go from here all the way to 17th. So I'm really excited about it. Thank you so much.
Very good. Okay. Why don't we go ahead and vote then? Amy, on this amendment?
Councilor Hoy,
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke,
Aye.
Councilor Barney,
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton,
Aye.
Councilor Anderson,
Aye.
Councilor Phillips,
Aye.
Councilor Leung, I believe dropped off the meeting. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Motion passes. Now we're down to Councilor Hoy's amended motion. It's the bond measure with these two changes, two amendments rather. Okay. Yes, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just do kind of a quick summary. I think this is, we've been through a lot of conversation regarding this bond and where it was going to go up and down and all around. And I feel really good about where we landed. I think this is a strong package. I'm really excited to support this. And I hope that we can get unanimous support from council, that we need to send a strong message to our community that this is critical for our city, and that we all need to get behind this thing and get it on the ballot and then get it passed in November. And I'm really, really happy with where it landed. So thank you.
Okay. Amy, you want to call a roll?
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Barney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung, absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. Now we're to 3.3A, Councilor Nordyke, you have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I think we're still on 5C.
Oh, are we? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we've got one more in there first.
Trying to 5C. Oh, Councilor Nordyke, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which one are we on, Mr. Mayor? Is it 3? Oh, that's
5C.
right.
I skipped over one that I thought I had a different note there.
Thank you. One moment. I'm scrolling down to it.
This is the work session one.
Yes, that's correct. I move to reschedule the Monday, July 18 Council Policy Agenda Work Session to Thursday, July 28.
Second.
Second by Phillips.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, the reason for making this request is due to the fact that I will be out of town. And as I understand it, Councilor Phillips is going to be out of town too. We don't want to miss policy discussions. We want to be able to participate. So I know we're already planning on meeting the week of July 28 for a regular council session. So I'm hoping that my peers will be supportive of having two meetings in the last week of July, but also being able to skip July 18 in exchange.
Great. Okay, any discussion? Okay, Amy, would you want to, oh, sorry, Tom.
Yeah, I in pre-council discussions about this with the interim city manager, I was led to believe that the new date, there are other councilors who can't be here. Is that the case, or did we switch the dates so other councilors, all councilors are available on the 28th? I mean, I am on both dates, but I just want to make sure that everybody else is.
Councilor Barney, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you. I think we have a special neighborhood association meeting that night, but I'll see if I can talk the chair into changing things. I will be down in Southern Oregon for work and driving back up that day. I should be back in time, but I'm just throwing that out there because it'll be close.
Are you okay with this? I mean, is this going to work?
Yeah, at one point I thought one day one counselor was missing, the other day two counselors were missing, and so now that apparently isn't the case anymore, which is a good thing. So I'm perfectly fine with moving it now.
Okay. And then you didn't set times. I mean, perhaps we can take a look at times, Councilor Barney, that would adjust to fit your arrival time down. You can just drive right in and take part or something. Maybe if you can keep in touch with Ms. Rutherford, maybe we can adjust that beginning time to fit your schedule.
Thank you.
Get everybody. Okay, very good.
I believe Councilor Stapleton was raising her hand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was rumored that I could not be there, but I will be.
Not true.
So
Okay.
not true. I will be there.
Okay.
And so I'm fully supportive of this motion.
Okay. Okay. Any other? Okay, let's go ahead and vote then. Amy?
Councilor Barney,
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton,
Aye.
Councilor Anderson,
Aye.
Councilor Phillips,
Aye.
Councilor Leung, absent, Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy,
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Now, Councilor Nordyke, 3.3A.
Thank you. The only thing I need to do was a declaration of a potential conflict of interest. My family owns property scattered throughout the city, and this is the capital improvement item. So I just wanted to declare that potential conflict before we vote on it. Other than that, I have no questions for staff.
Okay, do you want to make a motion or do you want someone else to?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
I move to approve the capital improvement plan.
Okay,
Second.
second by Hoy. Any discussion? Okay, Amy, could you call the roll, please?
Councilor Stapleton,
Aye.
Councilor Anderson,
Aye.
Councilor Phillips,
Aye.
Councilor Leung is absent, Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy,
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke,
Aye.
Councilor Barney,
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. 3.3B, Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the reason I pulled 3.3B is to address two things. One,
Could you give us a motion and then have discussion? That it just
Of
helps.
course.
No, that's okay.
No, you're absolutely right. Let's adhere to protocol. So the motion is to authorize the city manager to apply for funding to design and construct 7 projects listed in priority order through the SRTS infrastructure program, and if successful, incorporate the projects into a future capital improvement plan, and authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with ODOT to accept the funds. The projects ranked in order with first priority are set forth in your agenda and materials, so I'm not going to repeat them out loud unless people need me to.
Second.
Second by Hoy. Okay, Councilor, go ahead.
So I spoke with Councilor Leung, and I'm not sure if she'll be able to join us again. She is at a housing conference and has actually been leading some of the presentations. So that's why she's been dipping in and out of our meetings. Councilor Leung and I want to move up an item on this list up the priority list. We have received a letter of support from the South Gateway Neighborhood Association in regards to the construction of the Liberty Road pedestrian path. That would go from Davis Road South to Summit View Avenue Southeast. They are strongly supportive of this project, and all we are asking is that this project be moved up the priority list to the second slot. If you haven't seen that letter in your materials, I'm sure the city recorder can forward it to you. But one of the things I do want to confirm with staff, we just spent a lot of time talking about Davis Road, and I'd like staff to confirm on the record that this project is not the same thing as the Davis Road project that we just recommended adding to the bond.
Mayor, if I may,
Yeah, Peter.
same project. In fact, it is a very nice adjunct to the project. It is on the east side of Liberty from that new signal south. It would connect to Mildred. I just want to make a quick point. The projects are not so much prioritized as they are ranked based on the criteria provided by ODOT. So we can, if the council asks us to, we can certainly say that is the first priority. But it's important for council to understand that the planning staff actually did the numerical analysis that I think is in the attachments, and that's the way these projects laid out. So we can say that this is the council's first priority if that's what the council would like, but it's important for you to understand how the list came about and why it's in that order.
Are we in any way jeopardizing moving forward on this?
No, not at all.
No.
We can say whatever council wants to say. I just want you to know that this is a ranked system, and ODOT will do what it will do based on how the projects lay out based on the data.
So we wouldn't have any problem with ODOT if this has no impact. Why do they ask this question? I don't get it.
What question?
What this ranked order? Why did they ask for it?
I don't think they asked for the ranked order. I think we did the math.
Okay.
Based on their criteria.
Why do they have criteria if they're not using this to help decide on?
Oh, they are.
Okay.
Yeah, they are. This is.
Are we in any way, by moving this, would we be jeopardizing this program?
No, I don't believe
Not
so.
at all. Okay, good. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm surprised to hear the motion to reprioritize. I certainly support the authorization to apply, but I'm having difficulty supporting the motion based on just what I've heard so far. There are certainly, all of these projects are very important. We need safe routes everywhere. It's based on, the prioritization is based on an actual score, which is based on the criteria presented, and I don't think we ought to be messing with that. I would support leaving the priority list as is.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Phillips.
Yeah, I don't mean to seem unsupportive or unsympathetic of the community members that have been trying to, get a project like this through. But I'm not sure it'll change what actually happens. Having served on SCATs and listening at the last, South Salem Leadership Connect, they had a presentation, I think, on the application process for all of these. Basically, the long story short is we as a city and a community are trying to get state funds. And whether or not we put Liberty first, second, or wherever it currently is on the list, I don't think that's going to have really any bearing on whether or not we're successful at getting funding for any of these particular projects. So it makes me a little bit nervous because these are, technocratic processes. But I guess if, Director Fernandez says there's no risk, there's no risk. But I don't know that it'll really do anything, practically speaking, based on the way things are spelled out when you apply for these funds. So I'm not sure how I intend to vote. I look forward to listening to other council members speak, and perhaps they have a more clarifying question they can ask staff. Peter, did I get any of that wrong in my long-winded comments?
No, it's absolutely correct. I mean, we can, if the council wants to, you can say that this is hey, in the listing, this is our first priority, but you're absolutely correct. Your experience at SCATs is starting to show.
So it does have an impact. The ranking has an impact. Peter, is that
No. The ranked order that you see in what staff has recommended, with Market at 15th being first, Market at Aguilas being second, is based on our staff putting it through the ranking criteria, and this is the way they fell out.
Okay.
So it is our presumption that we will probably get funded. We'll get funded for the first or second ones that meet the criteria. So I think having council's opinion that, hey, this is the preference, but as Councilor Phillips said, he said it best. It's a technocratic process. They're going to put it through the number system, and whatever comes out first is what will get funded.
Okay. Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little confused here because it almost sounds like we are talking about an amendment to the motion by reorganizing these priorities. So I don't know if, and maybe Mr. Atchison could tell us, do we need to have an amendment or can we just reorder them internally if we want to? And Dan can answer that when I'm finished. But from my perspective, this is one of those issues that we talk about often, policy versus administration. And the council's role is to set policy. The staff's role is to administer it. And sometimes policy gets down to administration. Sometimes administration gets up to policy, which I think in general is a bad thing. And I think this is policy moving down to administration. We have criteria. The criteria were looked at by two different agencies. This is what they came up with. So, you know, we could make any changes we want, but the state and the city are going to look at the criteria and the numbers that were already come out in the I don't know, testing or looking at the criteria they did. So I think this is kind of as it's fraught with issues if we say we're going to change what the city and the state have told us are the policies based on criteria. So I'm in favor of exactly as the criteria are listed. So I don't know if we have to go through an amendment or we can just talk about that.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. What was your motion again, Vanessa? What did you reorganize it in your motion?
No, I didn't. I wanted to have a conversation about it. So I think it's a valid question, and I appreciate everyone's comments. I think they're very helpful, and I would love to hear the city attorney's point of view as well.
Okay, Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you. Sorry. I had a question for Dr. Fernandez. If these do get funded, you were saying that we're going to apply for all of these. I think there's 8 of them here, but we anticipate maybe getting funded for 2, maybe 3 of them. Is that about how this works?
That's our prognostication, Councilor. It's $24 million. It's a statewide program. You know, we're bound to get something, but we'll get, you know, 1, 2. I asked Julie Warnicki today, and she said, "Hey, we'll probably get 1, maybe 2, hopefully 3," and then it's just the way it plays out with the numbers.
Great. And then follow-up question. Thank you. Is there also other ways that people can get this project funded through the CIP or through other funding? And then also, when we move it up in as far as priority, would doing that through the CIP process be a better fit for that?
Yeah, we are. I mean, we're constantly looking for opportunity. I mean, this is just one opportunity. We're constantly looking for grants. This is, and I don't want to minimize. This is that's why it's on the list. It's a super important project. It's actually an area that has some topography issues, so it's hard to get the development community to kind of fill in this last piece on the east side of Liberty. Yet there's a lot of kids living there that will go to Crossler. So we think it's super important. That's just the way the numbers play out.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think that I land there as well, that these are all really important projects. But I land with Councilor Hoy and Phillips and Anderson. I think that maybe there's a better route to get this moved up the priority listing. And I would like to just stay with the ranking as it has come from staff.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Varney.
Thank you very much. I too agree. These are all important projects. I'll have questions some other time about exactly how they get selected. But I wanted to say I'm not supportive of changing any particular order, and basically because the criteria are developed and established so that you're consistent and equitable, whether you're doing interviews, whether you're doing selections for whatever it is. And so I'm really not in favor of getting involved in that selection process when the criteria have already been established.
Okay. I'm sorry, Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you. I was wondering if I could actually speak to the motion and not the question, if that's okay. I did want to acknowledge the first one on the list, which is the Market Street and 15th Street pedestrian crossing. And this is a project that NEN has been working on for 14 years to try and get this one funded. And I also just want to acknowledge and honor Carolyn Cobb, who was killed there in December of 2020, and just again send condolences to their family and to let them know that this work is going forward, and we hope to get some funding so that we can make this a safer crossing. And just really sorry for your loss.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor. That's another one of those up in that area that we've seen over and over. Yes, Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. I guess my question in part is this question even in order? In Ward 3, I've gotten some community feedback, both on the bond, which is already settled, but I think it might in some people's mind apply to this, because the goal of this is to create pedestrian infrastructure that specifically helps with safer routes to schools, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are community members in like Ward 3 and I guess now Ward 2, because we changed the borders, to get a pedestrian crossing east of I-5 that connects, both sides of Highway 22. So right now, there's kind of the south of Highway 22. They can't get to their grade school without going over to Lancaster. Cordon Road is deficient in terms of getting, even cars across, let alone bicycles or pedestrians. So, my question is, does a bicycle pedestrian crossing over Highway 22, which is likely expensive, complicated, state facility involved, is that something that could even be considered for a safer route to school, or is it not something that can be considered?
I think, Councilor, most of these projects are shovel ready in the sense that they are inside of existing rights of way, inside of existing facilities. That ped bridge to connect the south side of Highway 22 is an incredibly important project. So, but it would probably require it requires ODOT involvement, because we're going over the right of way, and it involves property acquisition. So we would have to purchase, somebody's yard or somebody's house. That makes it significantly more complicated, and would probably be more than this entire program. I think the staff report speaks to the program having about $24 million. And my guess is that project would be a lot more than that.
Thank you for stating that during a meeting. So thank you. I'll relay that information to my constituents.
Right, but that's a great. You said you're participating in stats, and that's where the Salem area transportation study, and that is where that project belongs for discussion and to make that a reality. Because whether Cordon Road is improved or not, I think that need would still be there.
We agree.
Councilor Leung.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've been hearing what folks have been sharing specifically, and in terms of the listing. And so I just wanted to confirm my understanding that the listing and based on the priorities was based on a certain set of criteria that the staff established, but then if provided the funding goes through, then there's a lottery-based system that determines which of those get selected first, or is it actually going to be worked on in that specific order?
Yeah, Councilor Young, Mayor, if I may, the criteria was not established by staff. It was established by the Oregon Department of Transportation. I know it's a lot of stuff to scroll through. It's attached to the staff report. The whole program criteria is in the back. So what our transportation planning staff did is they applied the criteria to these locations, understanding that these are important locations. And then based on the criteria, on the ODOT published criteria, this is how the projects ranked. So we will submit the projects in our application and describe them. and then await ODOT's decision in a statewide competition to see which ones of our projects get funded.
And thank you. And a follow-up question. So let's say ODOT selects the first 4 projects. Does that mean in the next time that ODOT opens this up for an opportunity for funding, is then Salem not able to apply for the funding for the other projects, or are you able to apply for those projects based on the ones that haven't been funded then?
We would always apply, and we would always look for whatever are the whatever the criteria is at that point. If it's the same criteria, then clearly Liberty Road would start climbing up the ladder if these are completed.
And third question, I'm sorry. Since it sounds like the city has applied for these fundings consistently, do you have offhand or no offhand of how many years that the city has applied for funding and how much each year funding has been awarded?
I do not have that information at my fingertips, Councilor. I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Councilor Nordyke?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank my colleagues and the staff. This has been a very helpful conversation. And I want to say, and I know I've said this before, I always appreciate our collegial conversation. We're always thoughtful when we talk to each other, and I appreciate that we don't talk down to each other. So I agree with keeping the priorities as is, given the points that my colleagues have raised. I really care about this pedestrian project, would really love to see it happen. And if for any reason staff find out that we're not going to be able to go through it, the Liberty Road pedestrian path using this mechanism, I would definitely like to follow up with staff and see what other things we can do to make that happen. But thank you. This conversation's been very educational.
Okay, ready then? Okay. Amy, could you call the roll?
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung.
Aye.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. All right. Information reports. Anybody want any additional information on any of these information reports?
Mr. Mayor, yes, I do.
Okay, which one?
I'm trying to find them. I had it all pulled out and now. Okay. My first question was on 6A. And that is the one where there's a zone change, et cetera. And one of the conditions from the Planning Commission was that the transportation impact shall be limited to a maximum cumulative total of 78 average daily vehicle trips. So I'm just curious if the staff could tell us, not necessarily how they arrived at that, because I'm sure we've all, one house is 9 trips or whatever, they have these national standards. My question is, how do you police that? How do you manage that? How do you know if there's really 78 trips or there's, 700 trips?
Sure. Hi, Lisa Anderson Overview, your planning administrator. So it's not someone standing out there counting trips. That's not how like a trip cap works. It's applied when development happens. So when a use goes into a building, again, we apply the technical standard, like this is the use. If it's multifamily, these number of apartments, we times it by the number in the traffic manual, and that's how many uses, and then we can approve the building permit or the use going in. So it's just a general assumption of the use that's applied when development happens.
So what you're saying is if they build X number of houses, you apply the standards to it and they can do it. If they build 1.5 times X, you apply that standard. It's more than 78, yes. They can't do it.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question on item 6C for Chief Womack. Hey, Chief, thanks for being here. I was hoping that you could just briefly discuss the report on 6C, and then do you anticipate making a revision to this given our recent budget decision regarding your staffing, or how will that impact what you've outlined here?
Sure, thank you. Trevor Wymack, Chief of Police, Mayor, Councilors. Appreciate the opportunity to provide a little bit of an update tonight. Appreciate those questions, Councilor Hoy. If you wouldn't mind, if I could just give a quick overview of the whole report and then get more specific on that. Okay, so tonight, just a few things to talk about, updates for the police department. One has some changes to low-level call response, so an alternatives to in-person police officer handling of calls. Some updates there, low-level non-emergency call types. Second, some efforts to prevent and intervene in violent crime in our community. And finally, third, a new approach towards traffic safety that we're pretty excited about. So just want to touch on those three things. So the first one being the alternatives to in-person call response. Just as a reminder, a little bit of background, we had the 2020 community policing audit with a lot of great findings and recommendations, but it noted some staffing challenges that we have as an organization. So then we had a follow-up staffing study done, an outside independent staffing study, which identified, of course, the need for staffing that we talked about, but it also identified some efficiency measures that it asked us to pursue, recommendations in that report. And so one of those was continue to identify alternatives to in-person call response by police officers. So examples of that would be that already exists. For example, all contemporary law enforcement agencies have alternatives to sworn police officer response to call types. So some existing things that we already have would be our non-sworn staff, our community service officers that handle certain types of crime reports for us that don't involve emergencies or dangerous situations. Also, online reporting system. We have an online reporting system where residents can file certain types of crime reports online without a police officer having to respond. And we have a response policy on alarms. Just because an alarm is going off in the community doesn't mean that a police officer gets dispatched. We have a verified alarm response policy, so officers don't get dispatched on every alarm call because so many of those are false. So it's those type of efficiency measures that we're looking at. So we took a look at all of our call types. Again, this department's already done a lot of work in this area, so there weren't a lot of things to identify there. But we did find some call types. For example, we're talking about barking dogs or loud music calls, or minor traffic crashes that are reported after the fact. So a crash occurs where nobody's injured, everyone leaves the scene and all the evidence is gone, and someone calls 2 or 3 days later to report that crash. We're not gonna have a dispatch an officer to go talk to that person to take that delayed crash report. There's other options like an online report. Certain civil disputes. Civil disputes means they're not criminal in nature, right? So maybe a dispute over property, a car sale, that there's a dispute about this price that was agreed upon, so forth. Those type of disputes, we're not going to dispatch an officer to, instead refer to other type of mechanisms to help resolve those situations. But I want to be very clear, this changes nothing regarding our response to emergency calls, to violence, to property damage, those type of calls. We're going to have the same type of response we have. These are alternatives to in-person response for some of those lower level things that we'd like to continue to work on for efficiency of the organization. Keep the officers more available to handle those more serious calls involving violence or property damage, for example. It also touches upon our response to certain complaints around illegal camping on public property. So parks, streets, sidewalks, not private property, just public property. You all authorized some additional funding to expand our capacity to respond to those type of complaints with Public Works and a couple police officers. And so we have a more robust way to respond to those now with the right officers trained in the right way that are really good at making connections to services and take a collaborative approach with the community. So rather than someone calling in a complaint and an officer being dispatched, we're now asking our citizens to use the existing online form on the city's website to report those type of concerns so that it can get to the right folks to handle it in the right way. So it's just a redirection, again, kind of an alternative response to those type of calls for service, which I think is a better enhanced response, actually. So that has to do with the call response, and I can answer more questions on that also. But real quickly, let me just touch on the other two items. So a priority for us as a department, of course, is preventing and intervening in violence in our community, especially gun violence. And so we've formalized a partnership with some of our federal partners now that's called the Safe Streets Task Force. And we know that major narcotics trafficking, major illegal gun trafficking are contributors to shootings in our community. And so this partnership allows us to bring in additional expertise and resources to bear on those problems. And specifically in our strategic plan around violence reduction, the strategy states, we want to invest in resources where needed toward the prevention and intervention of violent crime, leading to the successful apprehension and prosecution of violent offenders. Apply focused efforts to those at highest risk of offense or victimization, while consistently considering situational factors to avoid racial bias or disparity. That's right out of our strategic plan. And this partnership directly supports that strategy. So we want to get better and better at intervening and preventing gun violence. Just as an example of what that really means in a real practical sense, in all of last year, our investigative unit seized 111 illegal firearms. And so far this year, through this partnership, we've already seized over 100. And so we're on task to double the number of illegal firearms this year as over last year because of this partnership that we formed. So it takes, these are guns out of the hands of criminals. Very practical improvement by this approach here. And finally, kind of a new approach towards traffic safety. We're calling it the Oregon Car Care Program. Again, I just want to quote one strategy from our strategic plan real quick, because I like to make those connections, how the strategy is playing out in real programming. And around the traffic safety area in our strategic plan, it says, identify and strive to address any disparate outcomes, leverage stop data, that's the state traffic stop data that's collected on police stops in our state. So leverage that data analysis to adjust policy and practice where needed and appropriate in pursuit of equity. Direct any needed enforcement efforts toward the serious moving violations which cause collisions and injuries in our community and away from mere equipment violations. Create partnership-based programming which addresses equipment violations through education and cooperation. So our focus here is on the violations that cause crashes and injuries in our community, like red lights, speeding, and away from the equipment violations. Those can, of course, create safety concerns too. Lighting on your vehicle, windshield cracks, things like that can create safety conditions. So they're important to be fixed. But instead of a citation, we now have a program in place where we can give drivers a voucher for discounts at participating auto shops to help make those repairs in a more affordable way instead of giving out a citation. So again, this program just creates an opportunity for us to have more positive interaction with our community while improving traffic safety and helping residents save money on minor car repairs. Just as a side note too, this idea here around car care program was born out of some discussions I had with Salem Kaiser NAACP President Reginald Richardson months ago. I'm glad to see this come to fruition in a real practical way. And we both think this is a positive step forward here in Salem around policing and traffic safety. So that's the overview. Councilor Hoy, did I address the questions or should I go further into?
I think you did. I might have one more that you didn't quite get to, but I just want to say also that the refocusing away from equipment violations is also consistent with a recent state law change that was made in this last session of the legislature that I happen to be quite familiar with. So it's not just something that the city's doing, it's something that's happening on a statewide level to deprioritize those sort of non-moving violations, so to speak. So I was hoping though that you would also address what you anticipate coming back to us with when you're able to hire the 6 new officers we recently authorized.
Yes, we're going to be assessing our response and our needs as we go, definitely. The 6 new officers is very well received. Of course, it's going to be helpful, but we have a recommendation from the staffing study that says we need 60 to 80. So I think even with the 6 officers, we're going to have to continually assess the type of calls that we can handle in an alternative means. We still want to provide good service to our community. We just want to find a way to use our sworn resources, our most expensive, valuable resources, as efficiently, as effectively as possible. We're still going to be tracking data. For example, I believe one that may be of concern are noise complaints, right? Folks hearing loud music from their neighbors. Now, let's say there's a loud party and there's potential minors with alcohol. That's not a simple noise complaint. That's a higher level violation that we're still going to dispatch people to. So we're talking about just the pure noise only and finding a way to have that addressed in an alternate way. Still capturing the data, so that we will still be able to track and assess if there's a location that's a chronic nuisance, for example, or there's multiple calls at this location. We're still going to be responding and working with those property owners to try to solve that problem. So it's just about that initial response to lower level non-emergency calls, but there's still some follow-up and some additional alternative response that's going to happen as well.
Okay. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Chief, for the good work you've been doing with your department. I do have just a general comment and then a couple questions. My first comment relates to one of the prime complaints that I get from folks in my ward in the city is there was noise next door. Something was going on. There's a barking dog. I call the police. I get no response. And I understand from your perspective, gee, you know, let's look at a prioritization of what are the important issues in the city. But from the individual citizen's point of view, that's the most important one. They could not really care about whether you're doing a drug bust out in North Eugene, North Salem, excuse me, where in South Salem, people are revving their cars up and down their street, and there's noise and there's late parties. So, you know, and their perception becomes their reality. So I'm sure you've thought about this, but I think that this is going to be an issue that you will need to deal with the broader community as to here's why we don't do this. And you know, I'm sure you will figure out some way, but I really think that that's a perception issue that people are going to look at and say they never called before, and now they never responded before, and now they really never respond. So I'm sure you can handle that, but I'm sure you've thought about that. Then I want to talk a little bit about the Safe Street situation. You know, when I look at this and say guns are seized, drugs arrest, that kind of stuff, I don't know how much of that comes from vehicles or that are really in the streets. Because when I hear the word safe streets, I think about car speeding. I think about pedestrian car accidents. I think about car bicycle accidents. I think about more about that stuff than about the street is safe for drugs. You know, not safe for drugs, but you are dealing with drug crimes and other areas of violence. Like, for example, the guns you seized. Do you seize those on the street, or do you seize those when you in some other way?
Thank you, Councilor. I appreciate those comments and questions. Regarding the first part, the reason why some folks are not receiving a response already is because we are understaffed organization. So calls are already prioritized constantly. If we have 1 or 2 shootings in the evening, it's going to immediately tap out our patrol resources for the night, and we're going to have to stop going to low-level calls. That happens frequently already. So again, this change that we're making here is relatively small change in the grand scheme of things. In reality, there's already many of these calls that we're not able to respond to just because we're too busy with higher level calls. So there's already prioritization taking place. We'd love to be a full service agency and respond to every complaint. That's exactly what we want to do. We just don't quite have the resources to do it. And so we're forced to make these priority decisions. Safe Streets, just so you know, it's a formalized partnership with the FBI. That's what they call this task force throughout the country in various jurisdictions, the Safe Streets Task Force. And so it's focused on gun violence through the FBI. So technically that's just the name. I hear what you're saying though. People have different definitions of safety. People have different definitions of what a safe street is and looks like. This is just the name attached to it from the formalized partnership that we've entered into with the FBI. It's about enhanced prosecution and focus on illegal guns and illegal gun trafficking primarily. That's where that name comes from.
Thank you, Chief. I'm glad to hear that, because to me, you're stuck with the name is what you're really telling me. And to me, what you're looking at there seems to be more like a safe cities program, not a safe street program. But I understand that now we're back to federal funding and state funding. You've got, if you want the help, you've got to enroll in the program. So thanks, Chief.
Councilor Stapleton?
Thank you so much. My quick question for you, Chief. Thank you for all this information and for your work. I know that this is a ton of work to reorganize things and reshuffle and start all these new programs. But my question for you is, will you be hiring more non-sworn officers to handle this shift in how you are prioritizing and assigning work?
I think if there was budget authorization for that, we definitely would. I think part of the recommendations from the staffing analysis included, an enhancement of our non-sworn staff as well. I do believe there's opportunities to shift more type of responses to the community service officers, for example, the non-sworn staff. They just don't exist either. We have 4 community service officers for the department. And so that's not even 24/7, 365-day coverage there either. So there's needs everywhere. I do think that there could be some more efficient use of staffing with non-sworn staff if we had additional capacity there also.
Great, thank you so much.
Councilor Barney.
Okay, thank you. I basically wanted to echo what Councilor Anderson and Councilor Stapleton were talking about. And thank you, Chief Womack, for talking about, their issues. We have limited resources, and the fact that you're willing to look at other alternatives to address the what I'm thinking of are the low-level noise issues that pop up, and how the person who calls in once or twice, it's a huge issue to them. And I think my concern is when they get frustrated and more desperate about something and the whole thing becomes heated and escalated, where do you draw the line and step in? Anyway, I'm just hopeful that maybe we can look at some alternatives, even temporarily, whether it be civilians, whether it be from code enforcement, just something, so that we're reaching out and addressing those. But thank you for your comments.
Councilor Anderson?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I forgot to lower my hand.
Oh, okay. Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to piggyback and continue the discussion on non-sworn officers. When I take a look at the report on the staffing, the independent report that we have prepared for the Salem Police Department, on page 22, it talks about all the things that non-sworn staff can do to address the following call categories: vehicle tows, ordinance violations, traffic hazards, property damage only, traffic crashes, graffiti, found property, and animal calls. And when I look at the very next page on that report, it has a table showing the most frequent call types. And vehicle tows is number 3 with 3,172 calls. Ordinance violations is number 4 on the list with 3,127. When you start looking at all the other items on this list, you had almost 1,200 calls just for graffiti and 805 calls for found property, and then 590 calls involving animals. So that adds up to several thousand calls. And it sounds like, based on the independent study, the non-sworn staff could be responding to potentially thousands and thousands of these calls. So I'm kind of curious, why are we asking for more sworn officers when the independent study is making the point that thousands of the calls that you receive, including items 3 and 4 on the list, it sounds like a number of those could be handled by non-sworn staff.
Thank you, and you're exactly right. That's we just don't have the non-sworn staff either. So those calls should be handled by non-sworn staff. We just don't have that capacity either. So we're forced to try to make these alternative responses that limit. There's no one to respond to these. We're having to cut back. If we had additional staff for the police department, it would be for more than just, you hear me talk about sworn staff a lot. We talk about the 60 to 80 number. There's recommendations for non-sworn staff as well. If there was a revenue source to add staff to the department, we would take a comprehensive look at a balance between sworn staff and non-sworn staff. There's needs everywhere. There is a graffiti team that handles those graffiti calls already. So just because the call is in there, a lot of those are handled by the graffiti response team. The barking dog calls that we're talking about right here are included in some of those animal calls that you're referencing there. So we're just taking a hard look at all those call types and trying to find a way to avoid using a sworn police officer for those and find some sort of alternative response. But that we could do more with additional non-sworn capacity as well.
Right. And just as a brief follow-up, I mean, I understand, I think, why you want more sworn officers. We've seen a number of incidents in the news lately that raises concerns of safety. But I see a real need for non-sworn officers, and I see a real potential for cost savings to your entire department. And the more non-sworn people you have responding to these calls, the more we can free up our police officers for higher acuity calls. So that's my feedback for you on that, because I would like to have the best response times possible to ensure safety for everyone. But I also see how if we invest in staff that do not require that high level of training, the salary, all the certifications from DPSST, the Oregon statewide Department on Public Safety Standards, I see some potential cost savings for your department. I encourage you to explore that.
Thank you. I agree.
Councilor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and appreciate all the input from my fellow colleagues. I'll probably be a bit redundant. Thank you, Chief Womack, for your leadership and doing your utmost in a difficult situation. As you've mentioned, every department is strapped of resources and employees, but I think you're putting forward a very strategic, well thought out process and policies that put Salem on the best possible footing. And moving forward, it's going to be up to all of us to try and work with our community to try and get those additional resources we all know that we need. I hope that our initial down payment with 6 new full-time sworn officers is helpful in moving your department towards that community model of policing that you're trying to enact. But mostly tonight, I appreciate the update and I thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Any other topics you'd like to go over in the information report? Okay. We don't have any first readings. We have a second reading.
Ordinance Bill number 1422, an ordinance declaring certain territory located at 4314 Munkers Street Southeast and lands adjacent annexed to the city of Salem, prescribing zoning and withdrawing the territory from the Marion County Fire District number 1, East Salem Sewer and Drainage District, and Suburban East Salem Water District. Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung. Is absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Barney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay. Motion passes. We have no further business, so if there's no objection, we will adjourn. Have a good evening.
For more videos and for more information, go to capitalcommunitymedia.org and follow us on social media.